Welcome back. The 10th Cairo Climate Change Forum was held recently under the slogan, "A debate on the road to Doha, chance exists for Egypt." We'll bring you more about this important topic with our guest for today, Mr. Martin Bergfelder. He is Scientific Counselor and Head of Science Department in the German Embassy. Hello and good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us, sir. What was different this time in the Climate Change Forum, in your discussions this time?
This time we had a very political issue. As before, we have been working the last few times, especially with NGO and education issues. This time we were very political, and we were discussing the at conference in Doha, which is the international conference on climate change, where all the countries of the world come together. It's a United Nations conference trying to work on a global deal in order to solve the issue of climate change. And we had a very eminent speaker from Germany, the lead negotiator of the German team for all these international conferences. If you want, the foreign minister of the Environmental Affairs Ministry. And we had his counterpart in the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, His Excellency Mr. Gamal el-Din, who is leading the Egyptian delegations in these international conferences.
Well, the slogan is very interesting. I mean, a debate on the road to Doha, chance exists for Egypt. Tell us more about the chance that really exists for Egypt.
The issue is that climate change is a global problem which will affect Egypt, but which also offers many opportunities for Egypt. At the international stage, a lot of support mechanisms are being set up. A big fund is being set up called the Green Climate Fund, which is, at least in 2020, will have 100 billion euros a year in the fund. So, and already now a lot of money is in this. And also on the bilateral level, a lot of countries from the developed world are interested in cooperating with developing countries in order to help them. And how can Egypt benefit from this? How can you set up the framework here in your country in order to grasp the opportunities that are out there, help you promote sustainable development in your country?
Okay. Sir, let's talk about your preparations for the upcoming summit in Doha. You as an official in the German embassy here in Egypt and as the German participation in the conference.
Our role here in the embassy is to be in contact with the relevant authorities in Egypt. That's mainly the Foreign Office, but also the Environment Affairs Ministry. But the Foreign Office is in the lead for these negotiations. So we are trying to discuss with them the positions, finding out where we can find some common ground in order to prepare for the conference.
Are you any recommendations during the conference?
Sure, but this is really what we're doing now is all informal discussions, because the formal part is taking place in Doha. But of course the German position or the European position is well known, and the Egyptian position is also well known. That's the official level. But of course we're trying to approach in the run-up to Doha. And this of course is a very complex issue. International negotiations are always complicated, but the climate change is one of the most important and difficult ones, because it affects so many different areas: economy, sustainable development, environment, trade, health. So many issues are at stake and you have to find a consensus among all the 195 countries that are involved. So it's only by consensus that you can move forward, and Egypt is an important player in this. Egypt is a big country. Egypt is leading the Arab group of countries. Egypt is part of the African group. So there are various negotiation groupings inside these 195 countries, and Egypt can play an important role also on the regional level, helping to facilitate common understanding.
So talking about that might face the issues or the problems of the climate change, how can they work together, and do we have some countries that will be highly affected or more affected than others?
First of all countries will be affected by climate change.
With the same level, I mean?
Not with the same level. It depends on their geographic location and also...
what about Egypt, for example?
Egypt is, among all the studies we have seen so far, is one of the countries that will be affected the most, especially because you have low-lying coastlines, which means if the sea level rises just by 1 meter, you will, in all the delta, you will have salt water coming in. And then if you have more droughts, when it gets hotter, you will have less water and you will have problems with your agriculture. So Egypt is among the countries that will be most affected. The other countries are like Bangladesh, for example, is a good example where you have a lot of the population living in coastal areas. And then, of course, you have the small island states, which basically will soon not exist anymore if we don't stop climate change, because they will all be flooded and they have to go somewhere else. That's the scientific part. And the other part is your ability to deal with this. And there, Egypt has an advantage compared to other countries in Africa or in Asia, because you have well-educated people here. You have good researchers. You have the capabilities to deal with the problem, and we are willing, and we are already doing that, helping you in order to identify best practices from other countries, what you can use here, like building dams, research for new crops, looking for alternative ways of energies. So I would say Egypt is, from the scientific part, not so could deal with the issue, but you have to really, because it's a long-term issue, you have to focus on the issue and have a strategy and also implement the strategy, because climate change is a gradual problem. You will not see the sea level rise in next year by 1 meter, but it will go slowly, slowly, slowly. So it is a problem on a long-term scale. But it's also a problem that you cannot solve in 20 years. You cannot start in 20 years. But if you don't start to act now, in 20 years it's too late, because the climate, the Earth atmosphere is acting slowly. So all the atmosphere now, they will stay there for a long time.
Okay. Sir, what will be the theme or the main title in this round of talks in Doha?
The main title is, or the main issue is, working on a new agreement. There has been an agreement in the international arena which will end this year, the famous Kyoto Protocol, in which the developed countries have committed to some action, reducing their emissions, and the first so-called commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol ends in December this year. And we have not yet reached an agreement how to continue afterwards. So time is really running out, and if we don't move forward in Doha, we will have a gap. There will be nothing left really from this international process that has been going on for 20 years. It took 20 years to negotiate and set up the system. It's not perfect, but if we don't manage to continue on this, then after Doha we might leave Doha, which I don't hope, without any further agreement. So there are various issues. I don't want to go into the whole details, but the main thing is find a solution what to do after 2012 for a short-term period, and negotiate an agreement on the long-term period. And it takes time. First you negotiate the agreement, ratify the agreement, that's international rules. 195 countries have to ratify the agreement, have to bring them to parliament, and then it's only there. So you cannot just agree on it and then it enters into force the next day. So there will be some intermediate solutions that we will have to find in order to not leave this totally without regulation.
So I mean, after each of these conferences, this conference, the upcoming one, is not the first one, as of course, just as we were talking before. So usually what happens after the conference? I mean, the recommendations or taking the decision where the next conference will take place and how to take benefit of all what happened during the conference.
There is a huge, huge institutions behind this conference. It's not only that the countries meet once a year and then they meet again a year afterwards, but There's a big in Bonn, actually in Germany. It's called the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And they have, I don't know, 200, 300 people working there. And they have intermediate meetings on technical levels several times a year. And out of one of these conferences, you might have maybe one big political decision and then 30 or 40 decisions on dealing with specific issues, shipping, aviation, agriculture, scientific research, and all these decisions are implemented on a technical level. So it's a process that basically is going on the whole year, since 20 years.
And this institution is following whether all this have been implemented or...
Yes. And, but there are parallel processes going on. There are still some leftover works from 5-10 years ago that they have to follow. And then there are big international funds also where countries put money in, and these funds put the money, and so there's a huge apparatus going on, and these conferences at the end of the year are only, if you want, the climax of the whole thing, where the political leaders come together also to take the big decisions which bureaucrats and experts cannot take. But in parallel, there's always a big process going on expert level.
Okay. Sir, you mentioned that one of the topics discussed in Doha this time will be the fact that the participating countries failed to live up to the goals set in the Kyoto Protocol. Is this maybe due to the fact that most resolutions or all resolutions that come out of such conferences are non-binding in nature?
What I would say is, surprisingly, the climate change negotiations and the legal framework you have is one of the few at the international level where you actually have binding things. The Kyoto Protocol is a binding instrument which has a compliance mechanism behind it. So if you don't fulfill your commitments, there is the possibility to put, for example, financial sanctions on you. So if you're a lawyer interested in international law, you will always look into the climate change conventions as an example for one of the few international agreements where you actually have binding commitments. Nevertheless, on an international level, even if you have all these compliance mechanisms, if a country just pulls out, what do you want to do? Send the army, or there's, you know. So at the end, it always, once you are dealing with countries, you always need the goodwill of the countries to move forward.
Well, at the end, Mr. Martin Bergfelder, the scientific counselor and head of science department of German Embassy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you for being with us. And this brings us to the end of this morning's edition of Breakfast Show. Thank you for joining us.